Story by I Baby 1, A Witness by the Ice. With all the recent talk about aliens and Disclosure Day, I want to share a random experience I had running into a bald white man in a suit, or Men in Black, as I've come to find out. Maybe it was a prank, I don't know, but it never made sense to me. For context, I used to work at Jack in the Box in California. I worked the late night shift from around 8 p.m. until about 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. in a small town. We were never busy around this time. Small town vibes. The streets were empty by around 10 p.m. We would get the occasional customer, but usually I just cleaned and prepped. Anyways, it's dead as always. My manager lets me go home early at about 3 a.m. I was a college student at the time and knew it was easier to get gas on the way home rather than wake up early and get gas before going to class in the morning. I'm driving home and again, it's empty. Pitch black. Not a car in sight, but that's normal. My drive home was always like that. I stopped by a local gas station, nothing big, not like an Arco, just 2 pumps, no attendant, and barely lit. I knew there was most likely nobody there. I pull up to the gas station. I'm alone, or so I think, but when I get out of the car, I notice a tall, white, bald man in a full suit, long jacket, and a briefcase. The outfit alone made no sense to me since it was not that cold, nor the style of someone who would live in that town. It was way too professional, and there was no reason for it. I think nothing of it. I assume he's pumping gas until I notice there are no other cars in the lot. Just my car. It was definitely not a walkable area, so the only thing I'm thinking about is how the hell he get there with no car, and why is he just standing there at 3 a.m.? My guard is up, obviously just as it would be with anybody, but the entire time I'm pumping gas, he's just standing there. He's not smoking or doing anything. He doesn't move the entire time I'm pumping gas, and I'm just trying to get out of there as fast as I can. We're in clear eyeshot of each other, and he's maybe 20 feet away, standing in front of the ice machine. As I finish pumping gas and walk around my car, I'm clearly staring at him. I don't want to take my eyes off him. I get in my car, and I can still see him there. He never looks at me or acknowledges that I'm there. As I'm pulling away, I do a final look to see if anything has changed, and almost as if he saw me look at him in the rearview mirror, he just walks off into the darkness towards my direction. Again, it's not a walkable area, there's nothing he could be heading towards. I can see a little bit of him in the rear view, and even though I knew he couldn't keep up with the car, I still took a random way home that I typically would not drive. Never saw him again. Never had an experience like that again, but it just never made sense to me. Why be at that random gas station in this random small town at that time of night and doing nothing, just standing there? I get chills thinking about it because something about it was never right. I wasn't and am not super big into conspiracies and all that, but later when I came across other stories, I'm like, no way. He looked just as described, super white, basic looking dude, but not normal looking at the same time. Just wanted to share because I have mentioned it to others, but they assure me it was probably just some dude. I call these events imposters. They're possibly alien. I like to believe that they are. I don't know if I like to believe that they are, but I suspect heavily that they are. Yeah, because they behave in ways where if we went to a different alien species, we had a ship that could take us there, then we might try to study the inhabitants, the life there, but their cultures, their ways, their minutiae would be lost on us. For instance, staring at a person. They may not understand that that's creepy to us, but obviously to us that's just as straightforward as saying the sky is blue. So you don't stare at people, but they wouldn't know. Or observing someone late at night when there's no one. Maybe their threat prediction and internal operation is very different than ours, and they don't feel fear the same way. So someone just being there, observing, they may not understand as an alien species that that's pretty creepy. Don't do that. Otherwise, you could go down the route of maybe Skinwalker or some other imposter. Or it could just be as mundane as, yeah, it's a crazy person. I don't know. Given how you describe him and where he was, I don't think a crazy person would wind up in that place at that time of night. But that's just my 2 cents. Welcome. I'm Paul. This is Dave. Today I have 9 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. As always, my favorite one will be revealed at the end. Let's get to it. Story by Adrian L. Bale. 10 Years of Wonder. About 10 years ago, a friend and I experienced something that, to this day, neither of us has been able to explain. We were driving at night through some rural roads in central Italy, just talking as we went. Suddenly, for about a second, it literally became daytime. Not dawn, not a bright flash illuminating the surroundings, but full daylight, as if it were 11:30 in the morning. The sky itself appeared blue. The stars disappeared, and then just as suddenly, it was night again. From my recollection of the moment, it felt as though the event originated somewhere in the fields to our right. The closest comparison I can make is an explosion, though not in the destructive sense. I can only describe it as an explosion of light itself, a sudden propagation that seemed to take over the entire sky, rather than simply illuminate the landscape. In the days that followed, I checked local newspapers and looked for reports of anything unusual but found nothing. To complete the picture, the night was perfectly clear. There were no clouds, no storms, and no obvious sources nearby that might explain what we saw. Almost 10 years later, I still have no explanation for what we witnessed. Story by Clearfix 6073. Turmeric and Light. I grew up in India, and when I was in 11th grade, I was going through one of the worst periods of my life. My health wasn't good. I was constantly depressed, crying often, and felt like I was slowly losing control of myself. Looking back, I was in a very bad mental state. My family strongly believed in spiritual causes for these kinds of problems, including black magic, evil spirits, and curses. Because of that, they called a local spiritual healer who was known for dealing with these situations. When he arrived, he checked my pulse and spent some time observing me. After that, he told my family that there was definitely some kind of negative spiritual influence around me. He also said that it could have been caused by black magic done by jealous relatives or someone who wished us harm. Before this happened, our house already contained various religious and spiritual items. Some came from Hindu traditions, while others had been given to us by Muslim babas who claimed they offered protection. We had things like copper plates and other objects that were supposed to help spiritually. The healer told us to remove all of those items and either throw them away or lock them inside the prayer room. He then told us that the main ritual had to be performed at midnight. That night, everyone woke up for the ritual. I remember him drawing a large figure on the ground using turmeric and a white-colored powder. Even today, I can't describe exactly what it looked like. It wasn't clearly human or animal. It was just a strange shape that has stayed in my memory. He started chanting mantras. The only words I clearly remember are Om Shakti Para Shakti. He then made me sit in front of him. He took a few strands of my hair, tied them to a thread, and began asking questions. Who are you? Why are you here? Speak. Tell us what you want. As he kept repeating these questions, something strange happened. Suddenly, a memory from the previous year came back to me with incredible intensity. When I was in 10th grade, I went cycling around my neighborhood one evening. It was around 7 p.m. and getting dark. Outside my colony, I noticed a very bright light in the distance, near a fenced area surrounded by trees. I stopped my bicycle and took out my phone because I wanted to take a picture of it. While looking around with my flashlight, I suddenly realized I was standing next to what appeared to be a fresh burial site covered with flowers. The moment I understood what I was looking at, I became terrified and immediately rode home. I hadn't thought much about that incident for a long time, but during the ritual, while the healer was questioning me, that memory completely took over my mind. I couldn't focus on anything else. It felt like my entire attention had locked onto that moment from the past. What scared me most was that I felt an urge to respond to his questions. It was almost as if answers were forming in my mind on their own. I remember feeling like something was trying to speak through me, even though I never actually said anything out loud. I kept my mouth shut the entire time. After the ritual, the healer told my family that it was black magic. As part of the ritual, a goat was sacrificed. The head was buried near the entrance of our property. Lemons with nails driven through them were buried in the four corners of the property, and other ritual steps were performed as well. I'm not sharing this because I'm trying to convince anyone that ghosts, possession, or black magic are real. To this day, I genuinely don't know what happened. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was a suggestion. Maybe it was the result of being depressed, emotionally vulnerable, and sitting through an intense ritual where everyone expected something supernatural to happen. Or maybe it was something else entirely. I've never told this full story because I was worried they would think I was crazy. Story by Initial Count 4712, Proof in Blue. I've been experiencing déjà vu since I was a child. Weird premonition-type experiences that I have mostly ignored in order to hold on to my sanity. I've experimented with astral projection and lucid dreaming successfully throughout my young adult life. Never thought too much of it. Most of the time I don't share my experiences though, and I read about glitches such as duplicating items and missing items being found in the oddest of places, but I've never experienced it until last night. I was doing my laundry and came across a pair of blue underwear. I know for a fact that I only ever went and bought one pack, because when I tried to buy another, I could never find them again, but I liked these because they are very light and very comfortable. Anyway, as I continued to do my laundry, I came across the exact same pair a second time. I know for a fact that there was only one color per pair in the pack. I do not date. I live alone. There's no reason for me to have two miracles. Have I shifted? What happened? Story by Majestic Jazz Hands. A Mile Outside of Reality. I've experienced some really weird things in life, but I've never experienced something like this. I know people can sometimes start kind of daydreaming and lose track of time, suddenly catch themselves doing it, and realize time went by while they were on autopilot. That wasn't what happened here. I was very focused on where I was and what was going on around me. I've lived up here for almost 11 years. I've traveled this same highway, gone this same exit route more times than I can count. So it wasn't a GPS glitch or me being somewhere where I don't know the roadways or accidentally getting lost. Bright blue skies too, so no bad weather obscuring signs. It was still daylight driving to my friend's house. From where I was to where my friend lives, the exit numbers go down. I had to get off at exit 5, which is on the right side. Exit 5 then separates into 5A and 5B. I had to get off on 5A. Now, when you have to get off onto exit 5, there's 2 lanes of traffic that merge onto the highway from the right. These 2 lanes of merging traffic are what you have to cross over. You have to get all the way to the right-hand side. I say all this to point out that there is a lot going on in this area. There's a lot of vehicles. You really have to pay attention to what is going on around you when you need to get off onto this exit. What was a 3-lane highway turns into a 5-lane highway at the merging area that turns into exit 5. You have to cross over 2 lanes to the right, while those same 2 lanes are trying to merge left onto the highway that you were just on. You absolutely have to be mindful of everything going on around you, especially in this area. So I just passed exit 6. I'm in the right side lane, waiting to see the 2 lanes of traffic appear on my right so that I can get over. It's still bright daylight outside, there's a decent amount of traffic, but absolutely none of it is any kind of road construction or maintenance or utility work or police vehicle in sight. Here, the law is that if there's any kind of utility or construction work done on any road, there's at least one cop on site, with their lights on the whole time. There was nothing to indicate that there was anything going on with Exit 5 that was out of the norm. I'm utterly baffled. Where the hell did Exit 5 go? The stretch of traffic from Exit 6 to Exit 4 suddenly became much longer than it usually is. Like Exit 5 just didn't exist while I was driving at that time. I was so confused while driving through this stretch because it seemed like it was taking so much longer to see the merging two lanes of traffic and the sign for Exit 5. Neither of them appeared. I see the sign for Exit 4. I ended up having to get off on Exit 4, turning around and going back the other way. Exit 5 came up. It wasn't just obliterated off the face of the earth, thankfully. But this all happened 2 days ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. There's absolutely no reason for Exit 5 and its 2 lanes of merging traffic on a major highway to just disappear in broad daylight like it never even existed. There are so many layers and instances of different servers running concurrently with our own, and I think they can bleed together sometimes. I don't necessarily think you did a quantum immortality transfer, but you simply were observing different realities and the slight changes that they have, like the sign being different. It's interesting, though, that these kind of weird events, space-time portals, slight bleed-through crossovers, they almost always happen while driving. Is it something to do with the box? The metal box acting like a Faraday cage? But not really, because the glass allows signals through, so it's not like an elevator. I don't know. There's something really weird about driving, especially at a certain speed. You don't really hear these so much when you're just driving on a street, like your home street, very low speeds. Something about high speeds, long stretches of road, that produce these anomalies. Very weird. Story by Neat Caterpillar 103. Echoes of Midnight. Hi everyone, my name is Pedro. I want to share something that happened to me back in 2021 when I was 17 years old. I'm looking to see if anyone has ever experienced anything similar. First, I want to highlight that I have been seeing these kinds of entities since I was a child. To this day, I don't know why I see them, but I've gotten used to it. It's not something I want or look for. I can just be walking down the street, completely distracted, and suddenly I see an extremely strange being. Over time, I learned to simply ignore them and move on, but this one night was different. I used to stay up very late playing video games online with my girlfriend. One night, I stopped playing, but stayed on the phone talking to her. I shared a bedroom with my brother, but he was a very heavy sleeper, so my talking didn't disturb him at all. It was late into the night, around mid-dawn, while I was still on the phone, when I noticed a tall, dark entity standing in the corner of my room, facing the wall. As usual, I tried to just ignore it. Suddenly, the entity started walking towards me. At the time, I slept on the top bunk of a bunk bed. This being was so tall that it stood nearly 5 feet above my bed level. It stopped right next to me and just stared at me for a while. Usually when I see these things, they just look at me and vanish, but this one felt imposing, completely different from anything else. Then it spoke. It looked at me and said, "I'm going to kill and destroy your entire family." Hearing that terrified me. I immediately started to pray, declaring that it wouldn't happen. Right after that, the entity vanished like smoke. The reason this memory haunts me is what happened just a few days later. A sequence of terrible things hit my family. My parents officially separated for good. 2 of my dogs passed away, and my father had a severe accident at work where he almost lost his arm. So many bad things happened at once that, honestly, it makes me believe that what the entity said was connected to it. Has anyone ever encountered an entity that actually spoke or threatened you like this? How do you deal with the aftermath of experiencing this kind of thing involuntarily since childhood? Story by Capital Complaint 57-9. The Last Vigil. Back in 2018, I used to work late night shifts. Around that time, we were also rebuilding our house, so my family temporarily moved into another home. My grandfather had passed away in January 2019, and it was an emotionally difficult period for all of us. One night, I returned home from work at around 4 a.m. Nothing unusual had happened on the way home, but the moment I stepped inside the house, I felt that something was different. The atmosphere felt incredibly heavy, almost as if the energy around me had become dense. I felt an overwhelming sense of pressure. Thinking it was just stress from work, I ignored the feeling and started walking toward my room on the first floor. Before going upstairs, I always checked on my grandmother, who slept on the ground floor. As I turned to look into her room, I was suddenly overcome by an intense feeling of fear. A shiver ran down my spine, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Standing silently in the doorway was a tall black figure, around 7 feet in height. It appeared to be covered from head to toe in a dark robe with a pointed hood. It wasn't moving or making any sound. It was simply standing there, watching. My instincts took over and I immediately ran upstairs. A few moments later, I forced myself to look toward my grandmother's room again, but the figure had disappeared. The experience left me completely shaken. I couldn't bring myself to close my eyes for the rest of the night. About a month later, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. I have never forgotten what I saw that night. It remains one of the most unsettling experiences of my life, and I still cannot explain it. Story by Kingslayer67, 300 Meters of Fear. So, it happened around 2 years back. We used to live near Ayodhya, and we had some relatives in Gonda, near a small jungle, forest. Not in the middle of the jungle, but when you enter it, after 1 or 2 kilometers, there's a choraha, crossroad. There were 15 to 20 shops there. After that, a major part of the jungle starts. And just 300 meters after that choraha, there was a small cut on the right side of the road that leads to the village. It was just a kilometer from that main road. My father was a businessman. He used to be at the shop till 8 o'clock. That day he closed the shop at 6. I, my father, and one of my cousins, who was 25 years old by then, got ready. We had to go on my father's bike to a party. It was 25 kilometers away from my place, so we started around 6:30, and by 7:30, we entered the jungle. In just 5 to 7 minutes, we crossed the Chauraha, so my father said to us to be attentive for that cut. It was a small pathway. So we all were looking on the right side. My father was driving the bike slowly. We were all looking very cautiously on that side, but we couldn't find that cut. After some time, we realized that we came a bit too far, so we turned back, and after just 2 minutes, we were back on that Chauraha. I got a bit confused. We turned again from the Chauraha, and again started looking for that cut. We were going and going, but we couldn't find it. That's when I looked at the bike's speedometer, because when we started again from that Chauraha, the first white wheel was on 5, and the second wheel was on 2. That's when I asked my father, "Papa, if this wheel turned from 2 to 6 and the white one from 5 to 7, did we travel 4 kilometers? Papa said yes. So I said, we definitely have come too far again, and this time we're into the deep jungle. It was around 8:15 by that point. My father said, I feel something is wrong. I've been to this place 50 times before. It's not looking right. I'm turning again, and this time you two make sure to look for the cut in the road, otherwise we'll go back home. So, we turned and we were looking for that cut, but just after 2 minutes we see the Chauraha again, and when I looked at the speedometer, the bike had traveled only 300 meters. From one side, we traveled 4 kilometers, but in the return trip, we were back at the Choraha after just 300 meters. Completely impossible. We all got freaking scared. My cousin asked my papa to keep driving till we reached home. We all came back home. None of us know what that was, but we 3 will remember that thing all our life. And then you got another instance like this one, where you could attribute this maybe to server error, where you're trying to connect to a specific region, but that region is governed by a different server than the one that you're on initially. And the transfer process isn't initiating correctly. And that's why when you're trying to go to this place you know should be there, it's not there. It's simply not able to load it. Not yet. I suspect if you went back the next day, the server issue would be fixed. Now, what causes them? it could just be hardware failure in the real world. Simple as that. That isn't very helpful, is it? Nothing we can personally do within, we're trapped within the system. There's no way to escape, like the Matrix. No one to wake us up and give us a pill, and then we touch a mirror, and we wake up. Hopefully, if there ever is an opportunity to do that, you don't wake up in a pod of slime, surrounded by towers of human batteries. That would suck. Not how I want to wake up. Also, the food that they have to eat. It looked like slimy oatmeal or like cornflakes or something. If the real world, okay, such a stupid tangent, but in the Matrix, where you have Cypher, I think he makes a deal with the agents to go back in because he just can't stand the real world. And what he did was wrong. I'm not saying, selling out his people, that's wrong. But wanting to go back in, I do get that part. He went about it the wrong way, but I get it. You load into a program, you can be made rich, you're eating steak, you're just relaxing. Or you go back to the real world and you have to face this dread and nihilism because the food you eat is crap. And, well, there's one thing though. They can still connect to different simulations and programs. I wonder how often they did that. They just load into like a restaurant program and just ate. Now, in the real world, they would still be hungry, but that would be psychologically very useful. Like if we had a program to do that now, I don't think there'd be much market for Ozempic. Just load in the program when you get hungry, spend some time there, eat a huge feast, and then when you come back into the real world, you'll feel hungry. But a lot of overeating is just psychological, in my view. Yeah. Anyways, stupid tangent over. Okay. Story by Zezo Live, Dogs of the Silent Path. Hello everyone. Usually I write about experiences that I haven't lived through in real life, such as things that come to me while I meditate. However, this specific event actually happened to me years ago, back when I was about 12 years old. Disclaimer: I honestly don't know if this person was just a deeply unsettling human, an alien, or some kind of spirit. At the time, we were living in a small town in Greece, surrounded by mountains. Ever since I was young, I felt a strange connection to spirits, aliens, and paranormal things. Nothing crazy, but I always found hearing about them absolutely fascinating. One evening in September, around 6 p.m., my grandma, my mom, and I decided to go for a walk along a road that leads up into the mountains. In Greece, these types of mountain roads are full of nature, lined with dense trees, the sounds of insects, and if you walk far enough, you'll pass local farmers tending to their animals. Eventually, the path opens up to a beautiful view overlooking the entire town. It's a favorite spot for local hikers, but it's definitely not a famous or touristy place. For years, locals have shared folklore about this area, whispering stories about fairies and other strange entities living in the woods. I wouldn't call the place haunted, but even as a kid, I could always feel a strange energy there. It's hard to explain, but years later, when I started meditating and trying to communicate with extraterrestrial consciousness, I always felt like there might have been a small alien base hidden there, or at least that the location made communication much easier. Anyway, we started our walk, chatting like we always do. We crossed paths with a few neighbors, and everything seemed perfectly normal. But as we walked deeper along the trail, the surroundings grew completely quiet, and we found ourselves entirely alone. Since we had lived there our whole lives, this didn't scare us at all. Then the atmosphere shifted. We started hearing the heavy footsteps of large dogs heading our way. We immediately felt a wave of fear because the dogs in this rural area aren't small, friendly pets. They are massive, aggressive guard dogs that farmers use to protect their sheep. The trail was narrow, meaning we only had two options: keep moving forward past them, or turn around and head straight home. As we stood there debating what to do, a man emerged from the shadows holding not one, but 3 of these massive dogs. He was about 1.8 meters tall, thin, with dark brown eyes and dark hair, wearing a very large, heavy coat. Physically, there was nothing overtly monstrous about him, but the entire situation immediately felt incredibly wrong. My grandmother, who isn't exactly the calmest person, stopped a short distance away. She was close enough to speak to him, so she raised her voice, asking him to pull the dogs tightly to his side so we could safely pass by. We didn't get an answer. He didn't even look up at us. This was incredibly bizarre for our area. It's a tiny town where everyone knows everyone. Even if he was just a visitor or a tourist, you would expect a basic human reaction. After a few minutes of trying to talk to him nicely and receiving absolute silence, she started yelling at him and using some harsh language. Despite the screaming, the man kept his eyes completely glued to the ground. His gaze was just frozen there. He wasn't wearing headphones, and he clearly wasn't deaf. Yet it was as if we didn't exist. He didn't blink, look up, or show a single trace of emotion. His face was entirely blank and stone cold. He was physically standing right in front of us, but mentally, it felt like he wasn't there at all. I know it might just sound like he was being incredibly rude or was an extreme introvert, but his behavior was completely robotic. Even the most introverted person on earth would flinch or look up if an old woman was screaming at them and a child was loudly crying from fear. But he didn't care. He just kept walking slowly toward us with that completely blank, expressionless face. Terrified and realizing we had no other choice, we turned around and practically ran all the way home. To this day, my family still talks about this encounter. I'm not definitively saying he was an alien or a spirit, but it remains one of the most unsettling, uncanny experiences of my life. So, cheating, my 2 favorite stories are both the alien, possibly alien stories, of course, at the beginning and end. What can I say? I love aliens. I always will. Now time for the jokes. My wife. You promised to stop with the Darth Vader quotes after we got married. Me. I am altering the deal. Pray I do not alter it any further. And then, divorce is strong with this one. I got asked out by 5 girls today. I was definitely in the wrong bathroom. I think you were. Today, my son asked, "Can I have a book, Mark?" I burst into tears. 11 years old, and he still doesn't know my name is Brian. I was abducted by aliens. They made me wash my hands, clean my room, and eat my vegetables. Turns out, I was on the mothership. Mother knows best. I sued British Airlines for losing my luggage. The courts dismissed me because I had no case. How is it that there's always hair just floating around from Ben everywhere in Ladybug? That's unbelievable. Can't escape it. Alright, more glitches, check them out. See you next time.